Let's begin the news by telling you that the Federal Executive Council has achieved several key projects in the communications, housing and power sector. This followed a marathon Executive Council meeting which lasted 2 days and saw the approval of about 21 policy initiatives. News Centre's Emmanuel Bagudu reports.
After a 2-day deliberation, the Council approved several policies and projects meant to boost the economy and facilitate investment. The Minister of Communications says that the Council approved the procurement and installation of fiber optic cables expected to reduce the cost of internet in the country.
The approval for the setup of a special purpose vehicle, which is a public-private partnership to deploy 90,000 kilometers of fiber optic cable across Nigeria. For those who follow the development within the telecommunications space, Nigeria currently has about 8 submarine cables, which we're only using to about 10%, and this affects the quality of internet that we get across the country. So this approval means that we will now, in the next 2 to 3 years, be able to deploy 90,000 kilometers of fiber optic cable.
Also, the Ministers of Power and State for the Federal Capital took time to give their updates.
The first approval was actually for the contract for procurement of 10 numbers of 500 kV, 33 kV, 415 volts acting transformers, and 10 numbers of 33 kV acting reactors for the transmission company of Nigeria. The total sum of this procurement is actually about $4.8 million and 112.8 million naira. Now, the impact of these acting transformers and reactor is actually to enhance the optimum performance of the national grid, as we have witnessed incessant collapse and disturbance on the grid.
The first approval is for the award of contract for the development of bus terminal and other transportation facilities in the Capital Territory. Secondly is approval for the award of contract for the construction of Court of Appeal, Abuja Division. And number 3 is approval for the award of contracts for the provision of security operations and maintenance of backup generator for the street lights along presidential routes and Villa Gate 8, Federal Capital City.
The Minister of Finance also revealed the federal government's plan for the housing sector.
Low interest rates. I mean, where we are now, interest rates are elevated. Clearly, they are not the kind of rates that someone who is trying to pay a mortgage and trying to pay for the purchase of a house can afford, both in terms of the tenor of the money and the rate. We're talking about, give or take, 12%. I would say give or take 12% should be the target that we aim at, something that's affordable.
With barely 2 weeks to mark President Tinubu's 1-year anniversary in office, experts believe that these new contracts will help achieve his renewed hope agenda. In Abuja, for News Central, I am Emmanuel Bagudu.
Meanwhile, the Tinubu Media Support Group has taken a stand on the ongoing controversy surrounding the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Highway project, calling it a cornerstone of Bola Tinubu's administration's legacy. The group's vocal support comes amidst heated criticism from prominent figures. The group decried the condemnation from Tinubu's main political rivals, former Vice President Atiku Abubakar and Peter Obi, calling their comments an attempt to undermine the significance of the project. It accused the political adversaries of playing a dangerous game with a project of national importance. The group also argued that the focus should be on advancing the development agenda for the country rather than securing political points.
Let me just put it this way. We cannot say because I mean, let us say I was in government. That doesn't mean my house, my land will disappear. We had a life before we came to government. Do you understand me? We have a life before we came to government, you know. So the answer to that still is that it cannot be a crime. You cannot say because that is even assuming, without even considering that it is proved, because I don't have any documents before me to that effect. And I'm a lawyer. Assuming, without considering, the fact that my father is the president of Nigeria cannot prevent me. After all, Tinubu is a citizen of the Federal Republic. He has citizens' rights, for God's sake. If Sheyi comes to me and says, Barrister Onukwasa, give me a job, give me a contract, would I not give him? Would I say because he's the president's son, I won't give him a job? So all this one of a conflict of interest, you see, is really bizarre. It's just article playing politics with nothing. The law does not prohibit anything in the coastal road.
The House of Representatives Committee on Financial Crimes has described the allegations of bribery leveled against some members of the committee by senior executives of Binance as a plot to shift attention away from its case with the nation's anti-graft agency. Chairman of the committee made this known while speaking with newsmen in the nation's capital, Abuja, accusing Binance of trying to derail investigation into its activities in the country. He assured that Parliament will be transparent in its investigation of the cryptocurrency giant.
The allegation is that after the end of the meeting, and when the Binance team had left the meeting room, they were approached by unknown persons who allegedly demanded for bribes. Thereafter, another unknown person allegedly contacted a local council of Binance and again solicited for bribes in cryptocurrency. These bogus, obnoxious, false and fabricated allegations are pure blackmail, clearly designed to muddy the waters and shift attention away from the heinous allegation of financial and economic crimes against the Nigerian state leveled against Binance and which are intended to derail the investigations into activities of Binance in Nigeria.
To politics, and one of our headlines on News Central now. A new wave of resignation has hit the Rivers State government, headed by Governor Siminalayi Fubara, as 5 more commissioners who are loyal to the Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, FCT, Nyesom Wike, have resigned from the governor's cabinet. Those who resigned are Chinedu Mum from the Ministry of Education, Gift Wolu from the Ministry of Housing, and Jacobson Mbina from the Ministry of Transport. Inime Aguma resigned as the Commissioner for Special Welfare and Rehabilitation, saying there is no room for progression or development in the workplace. Austin Ben Choma also resigned as the Commissioner for Environment due to the political crisis befalling their state and other personal reasons. Mum and Wolu cited a toxic working environment as the main reason for their exit, while Mbina cited unresolved political crisis in the state as his reason. The 5 persons were among the commissioners who first resigned from the governor's cabinet last December in the wake of the political crisis in the state, but were readmitted into Fubara's cabinet following President Bola Tinubu's intervention. And to security now, an explosion rocked a mosque in Gadam village in Gezawa local government area of Kano State on Wednesday, leaving 24 individuals with various injuries. The incident occurred around 5:20 during the early morning prayer. A spokesman for the Kano State Police, Abdullahi Kiyawa, said preliminary forensic analysis showed that the explosion was expected to be caused by petrol. The injured, including 20 adult males and 4 male children, were transported to Murtala Mohammed Specialist Hospital for treatment. Kiyawa added that the scene was cordoned off and the victims were rushed to the hospital where they are currently receiving medical care. We also understand that the principal suspect, identified as 38-year-old Shafiu Abubakar, has been arrested. Joining me on the news to discuss this is security analyst Saludeen Hashimu. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
What implications might this explosion have for regional security and interfaith relations in Kano State and Nigeria as a whole?
Well, okay, it is very important to first contextualize
Okay, I think he's been interrupted. The connection is broken. Let's see if we can get him again. All right, we might try and get back to that conversation. Okay, I understand he is back now. Saludeen, if you can hear me, could you acknowledge?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
All right, go ahead with your response, please.
Yeah, so it was actually an issue that bordered around an unconventional explosive that rocked the mosque earlier this morning, and the information reaching was largely as a result of some domestic situation that resulted into that challenge. But the challenge that I want to highlight basically is around the access of citizens to explosive devices, which again brings to question the conversation around regulation. There's a poor regulation around the entire issue, which consistently has also become the need for government to put some policy strands that will help coordinate the issue of prevention and containment of people's access to stockpiles and explosive devices. What we saw very clearly was a case of a citizen who was able to procure, irrespective of how he used the combination, but again, it turned out to be some devices. And these are very veritable tool in the hands of terrorists, and how we manage this kind of procedure is actually quite unfortunate, because it would then begin to suggest to some groups the potential that they could also begin to deploy this kind of devices for the sake of distorting peace. But what we need now is actually a policy strand that will be able to contain, prevent, and also manage citizens' access to explosive devices. As it is, I've just spoken with the Commissioner of Police, and there seems to be some level of relative calm in the state, and they have actually tried as much as possible to isolate the situation from a general terrorism attack, which is quite comforting. So we would be reviewing the issues as we make progress, and then of course perhaps come back with some additional details regarding what has happened.
Okay, while we wait for those details, what immediate security measures should be taken in the aftermath of such an incident like this to ensure the safety of the local community?
Strategic communication, very fundamental. Security agencies must begin to speak to citizens, and particularly the locals, engaging them to let them know that there seems to be everything under control. They have contained the situation. Suspect is in custody, and then of course consistently debrief the general public on the progress that have been made, and that in itself will calm nerves, and of course will increase public confidence in the security agencies' ability to be able to prevent and deter future reoccurrence of issues like this. But again, security agencies must also be at alert that this kind of occurrence might just be an opportunity to test the water. Kano has relatively been peaceful lately. I think it is actually a graveyard peace. And if you allow any form of distortion of that pattern, tendencies are there that it will actually create some sort of resurgence into what is already known as a very terrible environment for conflict. So there must be some level of intelligence that must be deployed at all levels, but most importantly, strategic communication must happen. And I think this is an opportunity for the Kano State Police Commissioner, who just recently won a community policing award, of course, for his very constructive approach to non-kinetic method to again use that skill soft skill that he has possessed to engage at different levels and begin to engage community and traditional leaders as to how they can speak to locals, because that for me would be some immediate step that will help us to contain and create immediate stability.
We do hope for that stability if we are to flourish religiously and economically. Thank you very much for speaking with us. All right, to ensure that the fight against crimes is sustained with improved approach, Abia State Governor Alex Otti has assembled some of the retired security officers of Abia Descent to function in the newly inaugurated Security Advisory Council and Security Trust Fund committees. The inauguration of the committees was done by the governor at the banquet hall of the Government House in Umuahia. Chinwe Ugele was there in our reports.
Part of the assignments before the Security Advisory Council is to facilitate intelligence gathering and interface with various stakeholders periodically on crime fighting and prevention. Governor Alex Otti said the target of the government is to create security consciousness among the people while also building trust between them and security agencies.
We expect them to generously avail us their experience in security operations and intelligence gathering. The onus is now on us to make sure that nobody who visits the state comes under any security threat.
Also, because the issue of security involves financial commitments, the need to seek help from corporate bodies and private people who have the wherewithal was also stated by the governor.
The fund is empowered by law to work with private and public institutions to raise the resources that would enable the state procure important operational and logistics tools to support the various security teams.
Former Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant Colonel Azubike Ihejirika retired, who is the chairman of the Security Advisory Council and former Director of Operations in the Department of State Security Services, Ray Nkendirim, retired, agree with the governor that there is need to use recent innovations to address security issues.
I'm going to, along with my team, do assessment of what the situation is now, and we will work towards improving the situation as it is. And in that wise, we seek the cooperation of all.
Security today is about being proactive. Security today is about infusion of technology to enhance results. We look forward to infusing artificial intelligence into what we'll be doing to ensure that we give our people the best.
Hopefully, all the measures being taken and put in place by the government in Abia State will result to a more secure and peaceful environment. In Umuahia News Central, Chinwe Ugele.
Thank you for staying with us. Still on strike actions, aviation unions have instructed staff of Nigerian Meteorological Agency to embark on strike on Monday, May 20, 2024. The unions include the National Union of Air Transport Employee Association of Nigeria, the Association of Nigerian Aviation Professionals, and the Amalgamated Union of Public Corporations and Technical and Recreational Employees. The strike stems from management's failure to address 45 months of minimum wage arrears and consequential adjustments to staff. The unions are represented by the three General Secretary, Ocheme Abba, Abdurazak Seidu, and Wahid Sikiru, wrote a letter addressed to NIMET's Director General, Professor Charles Anoske. They also expressed their dismay that the agency staff has been awaiting the palliative payments sanctioned by the federal government since October 2023. Meanwhile, Nigeria's federal government has taxed education regulatory agencies in the country to ensure that unregistered persons are not allowed to practice as teachers around the country. Nigeria's Minister of State for Education made this known at a stakeholders meeting, which reviewed a proposed development project for the Kano Center of the National Mass Literacy Center. The Minister of State expressed worry, saying that the activities of unqualified teachers are contributing to the low standard of teaching in the country. Idong Joseph reports.
The teaching profession in Nigeria had its first regulatory body in 1993 and took off operations in the year 2000. This over the years allowed many unqualified persons to get available jobs as teachers. While educational experts have called for stricter regulation of teaching in the country, Nigeria's Minister of State for Education threw its weight behind this call, calling on the teaching regulatory body to ensure strict compliance with standards.
All those that are graduating to be teachers in at least National Certificate of Education and above must be inducted and registered as teachers. Those who are going to graduate as librarians must also be registered and inducted. Those who are going to be computer practitioners must also get themselves inducted and pay all the necessary dues so that quackery will be a thing of the past under the Federal Ministry of Education. We must guide teaching profession jealously.
Declaring open a stakeholders meeting on the proposed development of 41 hectares of land belonging to the Kano State Center for the National Mass Literacy Program through a public-private partnership arrangement, the minister expressed government's commitment to ensure transparency throughout the project.
We are going to be guided by a lot of things in going into public-private partnership. We all know that private-public partnership involves risk sharing. We will, as much as possible, together with the regulatory agencies, to reduce the risk to both the government and the private individual that is going to participate in that aspect.
Our gathering here today is a requirement under ICRC guidelines. I therefore implore our guests to fully participate to ensure that the outcome of this stakeholders' engagement rubs off positively on the PPP and upon the quality of delivery.
With government funding in recent years not being able to match the growth of the education sector, experts are calling on governments to seek alternate sources of funding to help address the challenges in the education sector. In Abuja for News Central, I am Idong Joseph.
The council to 6 Cameroonian professors lecturing in the country who were arrested, deported to Cameroon, and jailed in 2018 over allegations of planning to destabilize the Cameroonian government has accused Nigeria of illegally arresting and deporting his clients. While submitting a petition to the House of Representatives to help secure their release, he says that the lecturers were legal residents of Nigeria before they were illegally deported and imprisoned by the Cameroonian authorities. He urged the parliament to help secure their release.
In a normal arrest situation, you have probable cause that they are being suspected of having committed a crime. And before you get to that point, there has to be a procedure that you follow to get to either an arrest warrant or a search warrant that then leads to their apprehension. But when somebody arbitrarily, and when we say arbitrarily, we mean without any legal cause, is picked up and then held for as long as they were held in Nigeria before being sent to Cameroon, that is called an abduction. That is called a repatriation. And in fact, before you repatriate somebody, especially between countries, there has to be a bilateral treaty or a treaty that is observed. There's none of that in this case.
The news continues in West Africa. Women in the tech industry have made significant strides in recent years, but there is still a long way to go in achieving true gender equality. Historically, the tech sector has been male-dominated, with women being underrepresented in both leadership positions and technical roles. However, there is growing recognition of the value that women bring to the industry, and efforts are being made to promote diversity and inclusion. At the 3i Africa Summit in Accra, Women in Tech were celebrated. For News Central's TV, Afua Hagen was there.
Networking and mentoring. Young women seeing others just like them climbing the ladder will ask themselves, why not me?
The Women in Tech Conference was an eagerly awaited event during the 3i Africa Summit, which brought together prominent women in the world of tech for discussion and reflection on their experiences in what is a male-dominated field. The room was buzzing with women sharing their experiences of seeking funding for their tech startups, scaling up their businesses, and sharing tips on how to ask for better salaries that compare to their male counterparts. Standard Chartered Bank created their own Women in Tech Hub to support women in the space and help them grow their tech ideas into viable businesses.
We've supported these women by giving them grants. So it's a very tight selection process where lots of entries, and then we shortlist these women. We provide them with grants, we mentor them. They're part of our incubator program. So we've now have 4 cohorts, and we've trained about 54 entrepreneurs.
But being a woman in tech doesn't necessarily mean working with just blockchain or AI. Agriculture, fashion, and creative industries all use tech as well.
Tech isn't just about coding and technology and communications. It's also about being creative. So for example, I run a creative agency, but we are also using technology to scale our business. So that really helps because it doesn't mean that I have to be a coder or I have to be, super ICT. It just means that I'm in technology and I'm using technology in my business in some way. So if you think about it, women are all in tech. So it's just about, I would say there's a good uptake.
The key is looking to the future and what happens after big conversations like these. So what are the outcomes?
I think it's important that we have as many conversations as we can, but what's most important is what are the action points. When we come back next year, we should be talking about these are some of the things that we learned last year. These are the things that brands, companies, governments and development agencies have started to implement. These are some of the metrics that VCs are now tracking, investors are tracking to make sure that we're closing the gender gap with women's role playing an important role in technology and leading startups in the tech ecosystem.
The Women in Tech Conference was a great jump-off point to encourage more women to get into the tech space. The challenge now is for investors to be bold and intentional about employing and funding women in the sector, and for women to take the leap and take up space in the tech ecosystem. For News Central, I'm Afia Hagen in Accra.
A Gambian former Interior Minister, Usman Sonko, has been sentenced to 20 years in prison by a court in Switzerland for crimes against humanity committed when President Yahya Jammeh was in power. This is according to a non-governmental organization which presented evidence of atrocities committed against the former president's political opponents at the International Court. Philip Grant, the executive director of Trial International, the NGO that files the complaint for Sonko's arrest, said on X that the conviction sends resounding message against impunity. Switzerland tried the case under the principle of universal jurisdiction, which allows countries to prosecute people for crimes that took place elsewhere. Sonko is the highest-ranking government official ever to be prosecuted under this principle in Europe. Let's head on now to East Africa, where prominent opposition politician and critic of Rwanda's president, Paul Kagame, has been barred by the court for vying in the July presidential elections. Bernard Ntaganda had asked the court to lift his conviction so he could qualify to run in the election. Rwanda law forbids individuals who have been convicted for more than 6 months from holding public office. On Tuesday, the High Court declined Ntaganda's request, citing his failure to pay legal fees in the previous case. He maintained he had paid the fees, adding that he was not surprised by the court's decision. Ntaganda was arrested before Rwanda's 2010 election, in which he planned to run. He was freed in 2014 after serving time on charges including organizing unauthorized demonstrations and threatening state security. As of April 2024, Nigeria's headline inflation rate increased to 33.69% from 33.20% recorded in March 2024. This shows that in comparison to March 2024, the headline inflation rate for April 2024 increased by 0.49 percentage points. In April 2024, the headline inflation rate was 11.47 percentage points higher year-on-year than it was in April 2023. That's 22.22%. This illustrates how the headline inflation rate increased between April 2023 and April 2024. In addition, April 2024's headline inflation rate was 2.29% on a month-over-month basis, 0.73% less than March 2024's rate of 3.02%. This suggests that the average price level in April 2024 will increase at a slower rate than it did in March 2024. With me to discuss this, senior economist at Stars Incorporated, Dumebi Oluwole. Thank you very much, Dumebi, for joining us. Many analysts anticipated nothing less than 34%. But let me get your reaction to the 33.69% rate and what your expectations was. I think your device is muted. Please double check.
Yes, sorry about that.
Yes, fine, go ahead.
So STES actually projected 33.91%. So we're pretty close to what the inflation numbers were going to come up at. And we projected these numbers because STES, for inflation forecast, we have scenarios, and Nigeria's inflation numbers have since come up at our bear case scenarios, and that is the highest inflation rate we're projecting for the year or for the month. So in April, we projected 33.9, and the actual numbers came in at 33.69. Basically, with these numbers, I think most analysts did predict that inflation was going to come in higher, and that was primarily because of the exchange rate movement, lingering, increase in food prices and energy prices, especially the electricity tariffs that were revised upwards. So it was a combination of an increase in food prices and an increase in energy prices that generally pushed the headline inflation rate higher. However, the monthly inflation rate slowed, and to an extent, it does attest to the fact that, or it does attest to the impact of the exchange rate appreciating temporarily in April. So if you remember, between I think mid-March up until mid-April, we saw a steady appreciation of the naira from about 1,400 to around 1,100, and that did have an impact on inflation numbers. The NBS typically, typically collates their prices within the first 2 weeks of the month. So that's one of the reasons why we are seeing the month-on-month inflation numbers actually coming slightly lower. And we saw this decline across all the sub-indices. That's the core inflation numbers, the food inflation numbers, urban inflation numbers, rural inflation numbers. However, inflation risks are still very much prominent and are very elevated in Nigeria, significantly because exchange rate pressures have, come back. The naira has reversed its gains and is significantly depreciating right now, both at the parallel market and at the official market. And we do expect that the exchange rate pass-through effect to commodity prices will become more prominent. We will likely see electricity prices remain high simply because the exchange rate is now a determining factor in the computation of the tariffs. We'll also see diesel prices and petrol prices likely increase, simply because now those markets of diesel prices have actually been deregulated for a long time now. But then again, the petrol market has now been deregulated, and we might likely see an upward revision in prices, except if the NNPC and the federal government, say otherwise. For food prices, the expectation is still the same thing. Imported food prices will remain significantly higher, and this will definitely feed into the overall inflation.
I mean, there is increase, but it is slow. what Nigerians want is actual deceleration. Do you see that happening anytime soon?
Towards the end of, I would say May, up until the beginning of August, we might see a deceleration in the headline inflation rate, and this will be because of base effects. So if you remember last year, May, June, that was when we had the reforms take place, and that was when we saw the significant shock from the removal of fuel subsidy and the exchange rate devaluation, the first exchange rate devaluation. So we might see the headline inflation rate decelerate a little bit for the May and June inflation print. However, the chances of that reflecting in market prices are very slim, and this is because the issues that are significantly impacting commodity prices in the open market are still very prominent. Again, I would say the exchange rate is still, depreciating, so that will continue to feed into commodity prices, and particularly food inflation. Remember that food inflation in Nigeria is not only driven by currency pressures, but also structural issues, right? So, and these structural issues have still not been addressed, and that's one of the reasons why we're seeing food inflation significantly increase or remain significantly high, and we do expect this trend to continue until these issues are addressed. So I'm sorry to be the bearer of not so good news for consumers that are looking forward to significantly declining prices or a steady decline in prices. That would likely not happen anytime soon. And even if the exchange rate does appreciate in the next few weeks, we have the MPC meeting coming up next week, and the expectations are that the central bank will tighten again. So if that somewhat anchors exchange rate expectations and starts causing the exchange rate to appreciate, if the momentum is not sustained for at least 3 months, we will not see a significant decline or a steady decline in commodity prices because of the lag effect. So for developing markets like Nigeria, there's typically a lag effect of about 6 to 12 months for when exchange rate appreciations eventually translates to lower food or lower commodity prices.
The CBN governor has made it clear that the MPC might maintain its tightening policy. Doesn't this bother you, saying that beyond money supply, there are structural issues that contribute to Nigeria's inflation?
Yeah, of course it does. But we have to remember that the monetary policy authorities will only adjust the tools that are at their disposal, right? And right now at the top of that list is interest rate adjustments and ensuring that the transmission mechanism to other interest rates in the economy are also rising in tandem. We've seen the CBN do this, and I do think that they're on the mark with the adjustments that they're making. However, we need to also remember that, like I said before, it's the other structural issues, and that does not rest on the shoulder of the central bank. It does rest on the shoulder of the federal government. And until we see them make substantial moves to address the issues that are significantly affecting food inflation in Nigeria, particularly, we will still see inflationary pressures remain high. And this is because food items in Nigeria's inflation basket food items, they contribute about 51%, or they make about 51% of the items in Nigeria's inflation basket. So if we do not address the lingering structural issues, from insecurity to inadequate storage facilities to post-harvest losses, all of these factors that significantly impede Nigeria's food supply, we will continue to see these issues regarding food inflation.
You certainly are not a bearer of plenty of good news today, but I guess the forecast is heartwarming. Thank you very much for speaking with us.
It's just what the numbers say. Yeah.
Some sports news now. The Confederation of African Football on Tuesday declared that all 20 players presented by Nigeria for the WAFU B Under-17 Championship, starting in Accra, Ghana on Wednesday, have passed the examination in flying colors. The declaration of eligibility of all 20 players is testimony that the tests conducted on the players by the Nigeria Football Federation before the team's departure were perfect and sets the tone for the country to have a full squad to defend the title she won last year, also in Ghana. The Eaglets begin their defense of the title when they confront their counterpart from Burkina Faso at the University Stadium on Thursday. Two-time Olympic champion Faith Kipyegon has unexpectedly pulled out of the Eugene Diamond League event. Originally slated to compete in the 5,000 meter on Friday, May 24, Kipyegon's sudden withdrawal marks a shift in her focus towards the upcoming Paris Games. This decision follows her remarkable world record-breaking performance in Paris last June, where she clocked an astonishing 14:05:20 in the 5,000 meters. Despite this achievement, which fell outside the Olympic qualification window, Kipyegon must now secure her spot for Paris by meeting the qualifying standard within the designated window from July 1, 2023 to June 30, 2024. Her withdrawal not only impacts her Paris preparations, but also leaves fans and competitors surprised and eager to see her next move. Alex Albon has secured a fresh contract with Williams, binding him to the team until at least the conclusion of 2026. The 28-year-old dual British and Thai national has been associated with the squad since 2022, and his previous contract was set to expire at the close of the upcoming season. While the exact duration of the new agreement remains undisclosed, Williams has stated that it constitutes a multi-year contract extension, ensuring Albon's presence into Formula One's forthcoming regulatory era commencing in 2026. Under new team principal James Voles, Williams attained a 7th place finish last season, but currently languish in 9th position after a challenging winter marked by efforts to modernize team operations, leading to car build delays and on-track mishaps. FIFA is poised to establish a working group to examine the ramifications of hosting competitive domestic matches abroad. A legal resolution between FIFA and match organizer Relevant Sports in the U.S. has opened the possibility, according to Premier League Chief Executive Richard Masters. Although the Premier League asserts no current intentions for such ventures, La Liga is gearing up for overseas matches in the 2025-26 season. This revival follows the cancellation of Barcelona's planned match against Girona in Miami in 2019. Previously opposed, FIFA has now agreed to explore the concept further, considering factors such as scheduling notice, sporting fairness, and the impact on host countries' football development. Any proposal must also ensure adequate provisions for fans to attend matches in the host country. That's all we have for you for now. But before we go, another look at the headlines. 5 Pro-Wike commissioners quit Fubara's cabinet in Rivers State. Swiss court has jailed Gambia's former interior minister, Ousmane Sonko. Prominent Rwandan opposition candidate Ntaganda has been barred from July presidential ballot. Do send your eyewitness report to the number showing now on your screen. You could follow us on social media. That's at News Central TV. You can watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV, and on YouTube. As always, it's been a pleasure reading. Thank you for your attention.